Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Qi Zhi. Coming up in this edition, China says it will take necessary measures against the latest U.S. tariff threats. Multiple UN agencies are calling for an urgent renewal of the ceasefire in Gaza as Israel continues its attacks. And South Korea's government has approved June 3rd as the date for a snap presidential election. We begin in China. The Foreign Ministry has responded to the latest tariff threats from Washington, saying Beijing will take necessary measures. It comes as U.S. President Donald Trump threatened an additional 50% tariff on Chinese goods after Beijing announced it will impose a 34% retaliatory tariff on U.S. imports. Sun Tianyuan reports.
China's foreign ministry has strongly condemned the U.S. threat to impose additional 50% tariff on Chinese goods. The ministry warned that if the United States continues to disregard mutual interest and the relations between the two nations, China will have no choice but to fight back.
I want to emphasize once again that there are no winners in a trade war or tariff war, and protectionism offers no way out. The Chinese people do not provoke trouble, nor do we fear it. Pressure, threats, and blackmail are not the right ways to engage with China. China will certainly take necessary measures to firmly safeguard its legitimate rights and interests. China is ready to fight till the end if the United States disregards the interests of both countries and the international community and is bent on waging a tariff war or trade war.
Last week, China emerged as one of the primary targets of U.S. President Donald Trump's sweeping moves to impose import taxes. Beijing responded swiftly, announcing to retaliate a 34% tariff on U.S. imports, which is equivalent to the duties imposed by Washington. And on Monday, President Trump will escalate tensions further, stating that the U.S. would apply an additional 50% tariff on Chinese imports if Beijing did not withdraw its retaliatory measures. The Chinese Foreign Ministry denounced Washington's actions as a serious infringement of rights and interests of all nations, a violation of international trade rules, and also a threat to global economic stability.
That was Sun Tianyuan reporting. In North America, the latest U.S. tariffs are not only affecting other countries around the world, but also causing divisions within the White House and among President Donald Trump's supporters. Jim Spellman sent this report from Washington, D.C.
President Trump saying that when these tariffs from China put in place in response to the White House's tariffs go in place in just a matter of hours, that President Trump plans to respond with 50% additional tariff to go into effect on Wednesday. That would bring the total amount of tariffs on Chinese goods coming into the U.S. put in place since President Trump came into office the second term all the way up to 104%. President Trump also saying in a Truth social media post that all talks with China would end if China goes forward with this. But then later in the day at the White House, he seemed to change course, saying that he plans to have talks with China when the time is right. So there's a lot of mixed messages here and a lot of volatility. That's partly what has been driving this up and down elements of the stock market as people reel back and forth with these kind of whiplash decisions. Start with the J.P. Morgan CEO, Jamie Dimon. He warned that these tariff policies from the White House could raise prices. That's what pretty much every economist says as well. Could drive the whole global economy, not just the U.S. economy, the global economy into a downturn and ultimately weaken America's stand in the world. From billionaire hedge fund manager and Trump supporter Bill Ackman, he urged Trump to pause his tariffs to allow time for negotiations. He warned that this tariff policy could lead to a, quote, self-induced economic nuclear war. Strong words from Bill Ackman there. And even Elon Musk, who in many ways has been Trump's right-hand man during the first 2.5 months of his second term in office, posted a video on social media promoting free trade, and also made comments that he would like to see a European-U.S. free trade zone of some sort. He's in a kind of an online back-and-forth feud with top Trump trade advisor Peter Navarro, who's definitely a tariff hawk. So you see this conflict even within the White House.
That's Jim Spellman in Washington. Turning to Europe, the European Commission says its first tariffs against the US will take effect on April 15th, with the second wave starting a month later. The countermeasures will target a range of goods in response to US tariffs on steel and aluminium. The Commission said at a ministerial meeting in Luxembourg that it had offered a zero-for-zero tariff deal to avert a trade war, as EU ministers agreed to prioritize talks. US President Donald Trump said the offer is not good enough. Pablo Gutierrez has more.
Well, for now, the European Union has chosen not to strike back. Rather, they're looking to strike a deal to bring Washington to the negotiating table. They say they have a team ready to deploy to Washington at any time so they can start talks. What's at stake here? We're talking about $380 billion of EU products that are shipped to the United States. These are could be taxed 20+%. Now, on a last-ditch effort, we heard from the EU's top negotiator, Maros Sefcovic, who had talks with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick over this weekend, trying to de-escalate and input some common sense into the dialogue. And part of the plan, it's basically defending EU commerce. That's the first step, diversifying. They're looking at trade agreements with other nations. They talked about India and Indonesia. And they're also talking about deterring trade divergence, setting up a task force to help protect EU consumer. China is the second largest trading partner of the European Union. We're talking about $800 billion of trade, bilateral trade. What they're trying to do right now is they're trying to level the playing field for European companies. And we were talking a little bit before about Mr. Maros Sefcovic, who was also a week ago in China trying to strengthen those bonds. One of those areas is a customs cooperation program, and they said that that could be a positive first step to further develop this relationship.
That was Pablo Gutierrez on the EU's response to US tariffs. Staying in Europe, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer says the country will work to lower trade barriers with key partners. He has warned that new tariffs on UK goods pose a serious threat to their industrial base and the global economy. Michael Marilia reports from London.
Here in the shadow of London's Big Ben, business people are looking for matches, but not the romantic kind. Instead, they're searching for attractive investments.
So this is what it's all about. Business people meeting, chatting, and finding out if there's a chance of a long-term relationship.
It's been exciting. It's almost like a dance. Everyone's having a dance. They're seeing if they feel right with each other.
Across the Atlantic, President Donald Trump is dancing to his own tune, imposing tariffs on global trading partners. Some people say Trump's approach is making China look even more attractive.
I think really it's important that the UK companies here now start realising maybe who their friends really are. And in business, the one thing you need is stability. And I'm afraid there's certain places right now where stability is not really order of the day.
Chinese officials presented plans for their regions. They say they're gearing up to work with British companies.
I think we can cooperate with the United Kingdom, especially when it comes to the electric vehicle sector. I've realized that the UK is also very interested in exploring new forms of energy.
The UK has had its fair share of economic troubles. Even now, the country is still coming to terms with record high inflation. Some firms say Chinese manufacturers could be the answer.
Here in the UK, it's very expensive. The labor is very expensive. So for the UK businesses, getting their things done from China is a lot of saving cost. The quality is also very good. And in my opinion, that's the future.
It's not always love at first sight. Some business people are worried about safeguarding their brands in China, but they're working to resolve any snags.
I'm in the process of getting my trademark. I'm working with a Chinese law firm, and I really am looking forward to, trading with China.
Business is built on relationships. Events like this suggest countries are rethinking where their future lies.
That is Michael Marilia on exploring business opportunities in London. In Asia, South Korea's government has approved June 3rd as the date for a snap presidential election, following former President Yoon Suk-yeol's removal from office last week. Jack Barton brings us up to date about the presidential race.
Former President Yoon Suk-yeol had his term cut short, but normally there's a single 5-year term for South Korean presidents. You can't run for 2 terms, and it's a simple plurality system. There's one round of voting. Whoever wins the most votes, they become the president. The main candidate for the opposition will undoubtedly be Lee Jae-myung. He currently heads the party. He was the candidate who ran against former President Yoon and lost by 0.7%. On the ruling party, lots of people are being talked about, including the current acting president, Han Duck-soo. He's been a stable set of hands. He opposed the martial law of Yoon, but in a way that's hurt him within his own party. But the man everyone's talking about is Kim Moon-soo, who resigned as the trade minister and has officially stepped forward to run for president. Well, up until a few weeks ago, everyone, of course, would have assumed that moving on from martial law would have been the main motivator and that, of course, the opposition would win a resounding victory. But it seems US President Donald Trump and his tariffs have overshadowed all of that. The US, of course, being South Korea's second biggest trade partner, but also South Korea knows that the impact on other countries will also be felt. So, this is likely to dominate the elections. There is a sense everyone has moved on from martial law. What we see in the polls is the parties often neck and neck sometimes. One of the reasons for that is because the ruling party has shown economic competency through this period, but also there's a lot of outstanding corruption cases against the opposition leader, Lee Jae-myung. If he can push them through appeal and become president, he'll have presidential immunity, but even many in his own party are not too happy about this fact.
That is Jack Barton in Seoul. Finally, in Africa, at least 33 people have died in severe flooding in Kinshasa. The president of the Democratic Republic of the Congo has visited flood victims who lost their homes. Hundreds of people have moved to safer areas. Chris Ochemringa has more.
Picking up the pieces. Kinshasa residents try to salvage their household items after severe floods submerged their homes on Saturday. The floods were triggered by heavy rains that caused the Njili River to burst its banks. Sylvain Kankou is among hundreds of victims who are counting their losses.
All my household items, money and clothes got destroyed. I only managed to get this suitcase and some shoes. I lost my savings, food rations, a refrigerator and new chairs. I'm going to have to start life from scratch.
Some parents have been separated from their children.
I just don't know where all of this will end up. One of my children is still missing. I was told my neighbors got her, but I don't know where they took her.
The running water caused walls to collapse and cut off a major road leading to the international airport. The floods swept through this neighborhood of Devonom in Kinshasa over the weekend and caused a lot of destruction. Kinshasa is known for severe floods during the rainy season. Some civil society leaders blame the government for failing to fix the problem.
Whenever it rains heavily, there is a lot of destruction because of people's failure to respect the norms of urban planning. We Congolese like constructing houses wherever we please, but the government should bear the biggest blame for granting people permission to build in unplanned areas.
In 2022, at least 100 people were killed in similar floods in Kinshasa. The government has evacuated hundreds of people who were stranded in their homes and promised to support others. But many here are hoping a permanent solution will be found to prevent such disasters from recurring.
That was Chris Ocham-Ringer reporting from Kinshasa. Now recapping the headlines, the Chinese Foreign Ministry says China will take necessary measures against the latest US tariff threats. Multiple United Nations agencies are calling for an urgent renewal of the ceasefire in Gaza as Israel continues its attacks. And South Korea's government has approved June 3rd as the date for a snap presidential election following the removal of impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to The Beijing Hour, a one-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Qi Zhi. Thank you for listening.